You're listening to The Secrets of Avengers Infinity War, brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and our many generous supporters. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Avengers Infinity War, where we will discuss the deeper layers and meaning of the latest film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Joining me today on the panel are Lisa Hendey. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Dom.
And
great to be with you.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us. And Luis Escobar.
Hi.
Hi, Luis. Thank you for being with us. So, everyone, I just want to introduce, you probably know Lisa. She was with us recently when we discussed Secrets of Lost in Space. But Lisa is the founder of CatholicMom.com and a longtime friend and participant in all that we do at SQPN. And Luis, is this your first time on one of our podcasts?
Yes, it is.
Oh, great. Well, welcome. So Luis, if you've ever heard Father Roderick's podcast, he's mentioned Luis before. Luis is a storyboard artist on The Simpsons, and you said you're celebrating your 25th year working on The Simpsons.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow, that's
been
awesome.
A long time.
There aren't many people who can say they've worked on one show for 25 years. So that's
it's over half my life. That's how long I've been working on that show.
Wow, that's awesome. So, Avengers. So, this is the big one, so to speak. This is what everything's been building for. So, folks, at first I want to warn you, this is going to be full of spoilers, including the big spoiler. So if you have not yet watched the movie, pause, go watch it, go to the cinema, wait till it comes out on streaming or something, and then come back, because we're going to really dig into the movie here. So if you haven't seen it and you care about spoilers, watch it first. But that said, Avengers is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's this. Marvel was the first big cinematic universe in a sense, or modern cinematic universe. I mean, we've had movies like the James Bond movies where they were sequels and sequels and sequels. But this was one where all the movies were related, featuring different characters who would interact from, Iron Man would show up in a Captain America movie and that sort of thing. But it was all building over the last 10 years. And I don't even know how many movies, like 25, 28, something like that, movies, to this big event, which is a two-part event, this movie that we're talking about now, and then another movie, the finale, so to speak, coming out next year. And so it was a big deal. First, going into this, I knew this was going to be two parts. Luis, I assume that you knew it was going to be two parts. You're a comic book guy, so I figured you might know, right?
Yes, yeah. Okay. I knew it was going to be two parts, and I kind of suspected how it would end up by the end of the movie, knowing that it was going to be two parts.
Okay. There'd be a big cliffhanger.
Yes.
Lisa, how about you? Did you go into this knowing how it would end?
I didn't. And I'm going to say I'm like kind of a casual when it comes to these movies. So I always enjoy them, but I'm not like a big student of it. So actually, I didn't know. And I wondered when it ended, how could it possibly go on from here? So when kind of curious.
So that kind of brings up an interesting point right off the bat. So a lot of people, I mean, we could say right now, the movie ends where half of everyone in the universe, including half of our heroes, dies at the hand of Thanos, or at the finger snap of Thanos. And I know there were some people who actually walked out of the movie thinking that it was just this one movie, and this is how they were going to end the story of the Avengers. Like, this is it. We're done. Thanks. And they walked out kind of angry. Like, how could you possibly end 10 years of stories like this? Was that at all your experience, Lisa? Like you thought this was it?
I mean, I think I knew that there was going to be more because of the post credit scene. Just like there was a little bit of a glimmer of hope there, like right. When I waded through and saw that. And also just, I didn't want to believe that, that it could really end that way. So I had hope.
Okay. All right.
Because I was sad.
So So that just sort of sets the scene. So just to kind of recap what happens in the movie is we've had this character Thanos, who's a Titan. He comes from a planet called Titan. He is very powerful, not quite godlike at the beginning, although by the end he has essentially infinite power over the universe. And he's searching for, and over the past 10 years, we've kind of built up to this moment where he's been searching for these jewels. And we're kind of, this exposition tells us that these jewels were created at the creation of the universe, and each one has power, control over a particular aspect of reality. Well, one's called the Reality Stone. One's the Time Stone.
Yeah,
you remember
Soul Stone.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was. I just was reading one of the comics today, and they just broke it all down again. Dang, Soul Stone, Reality Stone, Mind Stone.
Right, that's the one that Vision. Vision had the Soul Stone. That's right.
Soul, Mind, Reality,
Time, and then two other ones.
Yeah, I forgot.
Well, and whatever they like, it's sort of somewhat arbitrary, except for maybe two of them are really key to everything. The Time Stone, especially, but we can talk about that as we go on. But for me, the movie, the whole story was centered on the idea of the value of a life. Does that sound right to you? I mean, just what is the one life worth against another life? It's felt like they kept coming back to that. So, and just to kind of lay it out there, at one point, Captain America says to Vision, "We don't trade lives. We never trade one life for another." Vision is willing to give up his life because they want to. He's got the not the Soul Stone, but the Mind Stone implanted in his forehead, and if it's taken out, he would die. It was the idea, and they would destroy it so that Thanos couldn't get it and not get the complete set. And Captain America rejects that, even facing down this notion that Thanos is going to try to wipe out, if he gets it, wipe out trillions of people. No, we don't trade one life for others. And several times we get that. 3 times I've counted, people are asked to sacrifice or kill someone else for the sake of the trillions. Vision.
And it's an interesting argument. Just that Steve Rogers said that since he did that himself in his movie.
Can you expound on that? Like, whose life did he trade?
His own.
Right.
In Captain America: First Avenger, he went down in the airplane.
Yep.
And supposedly died.
Right.
But he was frozen in the ice.
Certainly thought he would die.
Yeah. So he was trading his life for the greater good or whatever it was. But
right, and
but he wouldn't let anybody else do it.
Right.
Well, isn't there even this question of Thanos needing these in the first place because he's going to destroy so many people to preserve? I mean, in his mind, he thinks he's doing the right thing, right? Because he's looking to preserve lives. There are too many people for the amount of resources available. Right.
He's got these Malthusian ideas about overpopulation in the universe where too many, the people are using up all the universe's resources. And so if we cut the population in half, the rest may live with enough to have, which is, it's a very interesting sort of, they make the population control guy the bad guy, which is kind of an interesting aspect of this. In some ways, it sort of makes this a pro-life movie. I don't want to overextend the metaphor or kind of baptize this movie to but the idea of the population control guy, the guy who thinks that people should die so that others may live, is the bad guy. But I kind of want to put a pin in that for just a second and kind of go back to the Steve Rogers
argument.
Yeah, the argument, and it's a really interesting point because in Captain America's case, it was self-sacrifice. he was giving his life to save others. Whereas, in other cases, someone wanted to make the decision for another.
Right.
And yeah, I mean,
but the Vision was willing to self-sacrifice himself for others as well.
Right. Although he would need Scarlet Witch to kill him. Basically, she'd have to take his life. So
That's right.
It's a sort of the difference between. I'm going to get into philosophical concepts, and I don't have Jimmy Aiken here to correct me when I get it wrong. So you just have to bear with me. But
watch out for voice feedback.
Yeah. Jimmy, send me some voice feedback when I get this wrong, or Jeff Miller, or any of the others. But it's the difference between intending to kill killing someone, which is an active thing, versus the unintended side effect, which is I'm trying to save others. But in that process, I lose my life.
Yeah, it's not deliberate. Deliberate as instead of accidental. Or
incidental,
or secondary
even
side effect.
Yeah. So there's this theme of we don't trade lives, but we are willing to sacrifice. Which by the end, Vision does sacrifice himself at the hands of Scarlet Witch. Although that gets undone by Thanos. But even Doctor Strange talks about sacrifice, and then Thanos does the opposite, in which he kills the one he loves. He sacrifices Gamora to what he thinks save trillions. Like he takes this one that he says he loves more than anything else or anyone else in the galaxy or in the universe, and kills her to save others. And it's a very interesting juxtaposition, I thought, anyway.
Yeah. I almost got a little bit of Abraham and Isaac going on there in that moment in the movie, where he's called to do this horrific thing that he doesn't want to do, and yet he's going to do it.
Right.
Yeah, but nobody stops him, though.
Right.
Exactly. I thought maybe there would be a moment where it was stopped.
Yeah, but I hadn't really thought about it. But Scarlet Witch essentially euthanizes the Vision.
Right. There's no two bones about it. It's not an unintended side effect. It's not. She kills him to destroy. She destroys that. I mean, you might make the argument that what she's really trying to do is destroy the stone. She's not trying to kill Vision. She's trying to destroy the stone, and then Vision's death in that moment is an unintended side effect.
Right.
I'd still go to confession afterward if I were her.
Well, that is, yeah. And the argument could be said that she was only destroying the stone. No, right. And I mean, and that's kind of that is exactly the whole situation that does happen in a life issue where somebody, for whatever reason, maybe cancer or whatever, seeks a treatment that would be
right
harmful to if she was pregnant, etc.
Right.
Knowing that the cure would be deadly or potentially deadly, and it's still the same kind of a thing.
Right. You can't actively will the evil. You can't do evil that good may result. But right. if something that objectively evil happens while you're trying to do the good, you're trying to avoid the evil, but the evil happens. It's not.
And there was a possibility that that Vision could have survived it because he had already been going through that process of getting it removed.
Yes, that amazing Wakandan technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It was not certain. It was not a given, although it was overwhelmingly likely that he would die in that instance. So, and one of the things about this movie is that it kind of places like, shines a light on ideologies that place the benefit of the many over the life of individuals. We have a mindset, and I think the Avengers, the kind of advances an idea and I think that was the kind of a thesis in this movie, that individuals are important. They have a dignity. They have a value. And that's a very Catholic idea. That's at the root of our Catholic faith, is the dignity and value of each human person. And I think they were advancing that against this other kind of ideology, which says, no, the millions or billions or trillions are more important, which is some of these, pernicious ideologies that we had a fight against throughout the 20th century, whether it was, fascism or communism or, various totalitarianisms, all the isms. And it was kind of interesting to see that play out here in this movie. How do you think they did with that? I mean, was it well done? Was it heavy-handed? Was it too subtle? What do you think?
I think. Oh, go ahead, Luce. No. Well, I was just going to say that I think it was subtle because, I mean, to me, unacquainted as I am with the entire canon of the Avenger universe, it was clear to me coming in that Thanos is a bad guy. But there's certain points during the movie where you begin to become empathetic to him somehow. And to the cause that he seems to be on, particularly, when he's like in this place by himself, towards the end of the film, which leads me to believe that, there's a subtlety there that can be almost dangerous because you begin to suddenly see his perspective, which is not the right one. And to see how he's justified in his head, what he's going to do. So
I think they did a real good job with Thanos. I mean, he's not just, this is bad guy and everything he does is evil. He's not a caricature of evil. And you really see a sense of, he's someone who thinks he's justified. Everyone is the hero of their own story in the sense of he's a hero. He's doing the right thing. You'll thank me in the end. This is what's good for you. This is what's good for all of us. I'm a good guy in all this. And that's, you could see that going through this, and he cries when he kills Gamora, and, he's very, regretful about, certain things, but yet he does these horrific things. And I think it shines a light on, the fact that evil doesn't always look like evil in one sense. The monsters, despite he being, a giant purple guy with a striated chin, monstrousness, evil doesn't always look like a monster, doesn't always look evil. And I think that kind of came out in this, where Thanos, at some points, you almost like, wow, he almost seems reasonable at certain points. And then you kind of have to pull yourself back and go, wait a minute. No, he's the bad guy.
Yeah, that's the danger of it.
Well, Aquinas made an argument about whether or not it's not just what you do, but how you do it, and that makes the difference. It's not just doing the right thing. You have to do the right thing in the right way,
right?
As opposed to doing the right thing in the wrong way, or
right.
the worst way possible. And it's one of the, it echoes what happens in Black Panther with the antagonist in that movie, putting forth his position, and he was utterly and completely justified in his feelings and his conclusions.
Right.
But his actions were terrible.
Right. He was justified in the sense of, he wrong had been done to him, and there was injustice.
There was a huge injustice. Yes. Yeah. And his arguments for doing what he was doing were solid, but doing what he was doing was horrible.
Right. Right. Exactly.
They were they were terrible actions, and the notion was, I mean, even at the end of the movie, Black Panther, he understood and changed because of the arguments the antagonist/contagonist said to him.
Right.
But he didn't agree with his methods.
Yes.
So it's not just what you do, it's how you do it.
Right. Kind of go back to the ends do not justify the means. If evil means the wrong way of doing it can never be justified by having a good end, a good aim, that you're trying to do the right thing by doing it the bad way, which is what you just said. And I just repeated you. So, but it's a sort of that thing. So just kind of maybe kind of like move on in the movie a little bit, unless you have more to say along those lines. Actually, Luis, I think you were with Lisa. You were going to say something.
Well, actually, I agree with Lisa. I think it was really subtle. I think it was subtle enough. So because I'm just thinking about I'm thinking about Kingsman, and I'm thinking about Kingsman 2, which also took these kind of traditionally liberal notions and made bad guys out of these out of them,
right. Right. I'm trying to think. So I haven't seen Kingsman 2, but I did see the Kingsman 1, and what was it was Samuel L. Jackson, who happened to be the bad guy in Kingsman 1, and it was also it was the same sort of thing: population, overpopulation, that sort of thing. Wasn't that what the
yeah, I think that's what it was. I think it was exactly the same. Yeah. It was taking out most of the people in order for the rest to survive. Yeah. So it's the same. It's actually the same kind of interesting. It was the same bad guy villain thing.
Well, it's interesting to see this coming up in movies and in big movies and popular culture right now. This kind of skewering this notion, challenging people's notions, because people are worried about climate change. People are worried about overpopulation. People are worried about these things. And I think that, movies and TV shows pop culture can often remind us to kind of step back and say, okay, you're concerned about these things, but let's look at what, especially in science fiction is really good at this. What will happen if you took this too far or took this to the extreme? I think Star Trek always did that. They were very good at showing us what happens if you take things too far.
Twilight Zone too.
Yes, so the Twilight Zone, excellent example. And so these movies are doing that for us now. So that's really good. So the other thing about this though is there is the giant plot hole in this movie. Did either of you catch the giant plot hole?
Which you know what? I didn't catch it until you mentioned it. So
yeah. So Thanos' point is, there's too many people who are using up the universe's resources. Okay, the universe is infinite, essentially. It's just very hard to believe that you could ever have there's a trillion planet suns out there, stars. But okay. But now you have these godlike abilities. You could kill everyone in the universe with a snap of your fingers. Why not just make more resources?
I wondered about that since it's called Infinity War.
Yeah. Okay, but that's,
Well, if you want to just kind of branch off the point that you were just making with, this issue of conservation of resources and expanding population, which certainly, we know Pope Francis even addressed this in Laudato Si. So it is very, an important topic to look at, but there's no mention of let's be a strident dictator of people's use of resources. Instead, let's just snap our finger and come up with the expedient answer, annihilating half the population.
Yeah.
Right. Not the beneficial side of it.
Isn't it not there's not enough resources or it's overpopulation so much as the lack of the proper just distribution of resources? That is the problem.
Right. Well, you mean in our current time?
Yeah. So
yes.
So so maybe it's not the resources problem. Maybe it's just the distribution of resource problem, and he didn't. And maybe it's pretty much the same problem, but he just didn't want to deal with it.
Right. Well, if they've used up the resources, how about you snap your fingers and replenish them? You've sucked this world dry of all of its ore. Snap your fingers. Hey, it's all full of ore again. You've polluted the waters of this other planet. Well, snap your fingers and cleaned it. What? Why does he immediately go to, the problem is too many people. Let's kill them all. And I think, on the one hand, we've got a kind of suspension of disbelief because they're trying to make a story, and you got to have some kind of tension, and so this is the tension they chose. But on the other hand, you could say, well, part of it is that evil often, when we have these blinders on, we, like you just said, we often go to the expedient solution that let's just wipe out half the people. That's nice and easy, as opposed to let's reset the clock and do the hard thing and redistribute the resources and so on and so forth. I mean, it sort of betrays a mindset that says, I don't value life. I don't value the life of people. So getting rid of half the people is, just the same as, fixing the pollution or whatever.
Can I ask a question about something that's equally as philosophical about this from a newbie to the series perspective? It seemed to me that the division among, so I'm assuming in Civil War that the superheroes were divided against each other. So
yes.
We come into this and they're obviously still divided from each other. So is there any possibility that their division, the fact that they're not a cohesive force of positive in the world, is actually contributing toward the victory of their enemy?
That's actually exactly what the point was. Yeah. That's what it was. That's what Civil War was building to. It was building so that they could be divided so that Thanos could win.
Right.
That was the purpose of that particular movie, was to set up the universe in that way, so that
when you look at it, you get there's twice that they almost defeated Thanos. Once on Titan, on the wreck of Titan, where Tony Stark and Doctor Strange and Spider-Man and the others and the Guardians were there. They almost had him until Peter Quinn loses his mind. And then again in Wakanda, they almost had him. And then they don't. But part of it is because if you just know that if all the Avengers, Thor and Black Widow and Captain America and the rest were, the Hulk were on Titan with Tony and the rest, or vice versa, they would have beat him, which, let's be honest, this is probably what's going to happen in the next movie, is whoever's left is going to get together. And did you notice that the ones who are left are our original Avengers? Tony and Steve and Black Widow and so on and so forth. The Hulk, they're all going to be brought back together again. I mean, this is my guess, and that's their unity is what's going to defeat Thanos in the end.
Right.
And what's going on with the Hulk not being able to get to his full hulkiness in this film?
It just seems like a plot device to.
Okay.
Yeah. My guess,
really? Are you going to do this?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's supposed to, within the story, I think it's supposed to be the Hulk got scared by how easily he was beat by Thanos. Like, the Hulk is never beat by anybody. He's always the strongest guy in the room. And the Thanos on the Asgardian ship in the beginning so easily manhandled him that it scared the Hulk, and now he doesn't want to come out of his hiding place. I think that's supposed to be what they're saying.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it was just a convenient plot device not to have the Hulk in there helping out.
Right.
In the same way that they had to wound Vision right away early in the story, or else he would have been able to beat the crud out of Thanos all by himself.
Right. Because Vision,
Superman.
Yeah, Vision is essentially like like you just said, like Superman. He's essentially almost all powerful in most circumstances, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a little bit more Martian Manhunter, but than Superman. He's about in that kind of range, though. Power level. Wise.
So I would say that Lisa, you call yourself the newbie. I'm in the middle. I know the movies, but I'm not really up on the comics. And Luisa, you are the expert, so I'm gonna I turn to you for the expert knowledge on those things.
The interesting thing is that out of all I've grown up knowing about the Infinity Gauntlets. I knew they were a big deal. I even read pages of the Infinity War story, or the Infinity Gauntlet story, but I never actually read the story until recently. At least the first series, which was 6 comics, and they were each like 40 pages long.
Okay.
And then there was the Infinity War, which is the sequel, and then there's like 2 more stories after that. The Infinity Crusade, and then there's a recent modern one that I haven't read. So
are they all retreads of the same story, or are they just extensions?
They're the continuation and extension of what happened in the very first story, where Thanos got the Infinity Gauntlets and did exactly what he did in the movie. The interesting thing that I didn't know about it, and what was kind of threw me, that took me by surprise, is that by the first page of the first comic of that series, Thanos has the gauntlets with all the gems.
Oh, interesting.
So he starts with it.
Interesting.
And by the time the first comic ends, this is not even the end of the 6-issue story. By the end of the first comic, he snaps his fingers and takes out half the universe.
Okay, interesting. So what they have in the first comic, this is what this story is about. Interesting.
Yeah, the movie starts with him getting the Infinity Gems and all that stuff, but the comic starts with him already having them, and then he snaps his fingers at the end. And his motivations were different, because and rightfully they kind of changed it because it would have been really bizarre if he had done it the way it was in the comics, which was he fell in love with the embodiment of death.
I heard about that. Yeah.
So it's like death is a character. Like in the Marvel universe, there's like a I don't know, an entity that represents death, kind of like the Grim Reaper.
Yep.
And he's in love with her and wants to even out life and death, and that's the reason why he takes out half the universe. So
it's just a bizarre stalker thing, as opposed to trying to save half the save the universe by saving half the people. I can see why they didn't do that.
That and omnipotence. He just wanted to rule the universe, which is really kind of dull.
Yeah,
it's exactly the kind of typical
they always do
bad guy thing. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. So, when at the end, when all of the people die, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, the Guardians, and let's see, Vision, Scarlet Witch, Falcon, Black Panther, they all fade away into dust. Did any of that have emotional resonance for you? Not did you cry, because not everyone has that sort of emotionalism in a movie. But did you buy it? Did it work for you?
The one that got me was Peter Parker when Spider-Man dies, and I read something that scene was kind of like ad-libbed a little bit during the filming of it, and that he's the only one who kind of had a sense of like what was about to happen, and that was like foreshadowed by a point early in the movie where like his hair stands up on end, his spider senses can sense the evil.
Yeah, but his spider
him.
Sense is a spider sense. Anytime that there's a danger, he feels it, and that's it. And that doesn't mean that he thought he was going to die. Otherwise, any single time he gets a spider sense tingled, he's gonna die. Like it's
but I can't remember exactly what the line is that he says, but it's something like
I don't feel so good.
Yeah.
You know what he says? I don't feel so good, and he says I don't want to go, which is straight out of Doctor Who.
Right.
I thought that maybe he was. I'm like, like Tom Holland, like he was watching Doctor Who, and he said, I'm gonna just do David Tennant's line before he dies. And
see, when David Tennant did, I got a little dusty eyed on that.
See, I totally I was just like, oh my gosh, and then when Tom Holland said it, I'm like, hey, you're just totally ripping off Doctor Who. Like what? That's not okay.
I have to be honest. Like none of the deaths like held any like emotional resonance for you, because I know that there's another Black Panther movie coming. There's another Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Like they all have to come back. Like otherwise there's no sequels.
Well, yes and no. They all could come back, but I don't know. Like I don't know. Gamora, she may be gone. Black. I was surprised. I'm like, ooh, they got rid of Black Panther. That's interesting. Like, to me, I was like, ooh, that's risky. Oh, that's pretty.
Well, except
that's pretty brave to get rid of Peter Parker. Wow.
Well, we know that Tom Holland is going to make is starring in the sequel to Spider-Man. We know that Benedict Cumberbatch is coming back for the second Doctor Strange. Like we kind of, I mean, outside of the story, I mean, I knew. I don't know if other people knew that, but I kind of knew that they would be coming back. And so it was, this is why I like to go into movies and read books without knowing anything. I don't want to be spoiled because I think it changes the way you're supposed to receive what the artist is trying to convey. I don't want to oversell it, but you know what I mean? Like, the artist is trying to make a story and they expect you to receive it in a particular way without knowing that Robert Downey Jr. is not renewing his contract, or, you know what I mean? It's like, I feel like it kind of changes the way you watch a movie when you know these things. But I didn't know if you guys had known.
Can't those future movies just be like a prequel instead of, directly in the line of the story? Is that probably what they will be?
Well, James Gunn, he's directed the first two Guardians movies, and he's directing the third one. Some fans pointed out, well, we know that is it Zoe Saldana who's Gamora, right? I forget.
Yeah.
The actress, they're like, hey, she's starring in it. It says so on IMDb. And he's like, well, you don't know when this movie takes place. This could be a prequel. It could be before.
Yeah. And it could also be a flashback that she's in.
Right. Exactly. I would say to me, the most wrenching of the deaths was one that wasn't wrenching until after I'd seen it and heard more, which was when teenage Groot was dying. He turns to Rocket and says, I am Groot, because that's the only thing Groot ever says. Well, James, they said in the script, it always says what Groot really means, so that the other actors can emote against that. They can react to what he actually means. And in that, James Gunn said in the script, it said he turns to Rocket and says, Dad. So he sees Rocket as his dad, because they made clear that Teenage Groot is not the reincarnation of original Groot. He is, a clone, a cutting, a son of him. And so he sees Rocket as his dad. And so you go back and you watch it like, oh my gosh, because I'm a dad, I'm like, oh, give me the tissues. It was so sad. Like, oh, that was an emotional moment. Just kind of funny. The talking bunny rabbit and the tree, as Thor called them. So that was the death that was most wrenching to me. But only in retrospect. So the movie had a very difficult job, which was to incorporate very different styles. Like all of you have the seriousness of Captain America, and you had the crazy funny of Guardians, and Thor, Thor's a whole nother story, because his movies have evolved over time to the kind of the fun wankiness of Thor Ragnarok, which I think is one of the best of all the MCU movies, frankly, at this point, because it was so good. And they really did a great job of incorporating the feel of each of those movies into the scenes in which the characters showed up, or at least I felt like that. So like when the Guardians show up, you really get a feel for, this is just like the Guardians movie. It feels the same. And then when they interact with characters from the other movies, like so when Thor shows up, it's just hysterical. Like to me, one of the funniest scenes is when Thor shows up on the Guardians ship, and Peter Quill is trying to is feeling a little shall we say inadequate or inferior compared to him. So but I don't know if you guys felt like that about the movie, or how you thought about it.
Well, it makes sense why the tone of Thor Ragnarok was the way it was, so that because they were anticipating Thor showing up, interacting with the Guardians, so they kind of had to make a movie that bridged the previous Thor movies with Guardians, so that when he walked in, he felt like he belonged.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's actually a good point. That might have been very intentional.
I'll say for me, one of the things that was, I haven't seen Black Panther yet. So, and after watching this, I totally want to go back and watch it because I love Wakanda and that whole, like that portion of it. Just I just thought that was so epic. And
yes.
I really, really liked it. And I like those characters a lot. I like the women that were featured there. And I thought it was great.
I think Black Panther, I mean, we're kind of talking about Black Panther in this, but I wanted to do a podcast on Black Panther and I couldn't get a group together to do it. So maybe we could talk just a little bit about some of my thoughts here. Black Panther was lauded for how it showed the diversity. There were African-American or African literally characters in that they were represented in this movie. But I don't think people, as you said, Lisa, mentioned as much how women were so well represented in Black Panther. I mean, they were. I mean, they had very important roles, and they were not just, we have to have some women show up. Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, 90% of the movie and what happens in the movie was the women. Most of the fighting was the women. The most competent characters were the women.
Right.
It's just like the moral. They carried the movie, and Black Panther was like pretty much, like almost a secondary to the to all the amount of women in the movie doing amazing things, and they didn't have the power. They didn't have any of the powers that he had. Right.
That's right. And one of the things I really loved about Black Panther was how it conveyed the idea, the what if an African nation had the opportunity to have the technology and the opportunities and wasn't colonized and all these other things, what could have been, what might have been. And I think that was what attracted so many people to it, was the idea of, what if an African nation could have been the equal of any other nation in the world, technologically, economically, and educationally, in all these other ways, without being the result of or being held back by colonization. And so it was an interesting study in that. And there's a whole discussion we could have about that. I guess we're not talking about Black Panther, but I just wanted to kind of throw it out there as an interesting discussion about why it didn't actually happen that way in history, and what this kind of says for us now. But maybe we'll still get that group together. It's still worth talking about Black Panther. So the ending of the movie, essentially, Doctor Strange, he causes Thanos to win. He essentially gives Thanos the Time Stone, which is what allows Thanos to turn back time and get the stone from Vision. And I wonder if you let me throw this theory out there, and you can tell me whether you think I'm crazy or not. But I think the deaths of all the heroes, Thanos getting things, it was all part of the plan for Doctor Strange. Because at one point he says to Tony, there are millions of possibilities and only one leads to success. And just before he, dies, he says to Tony, it had to be this way. And I wonder if it had to be this way because this was the only way that would result, like going through all these deaths eventually would result in defeat of Thanos in the next movie and turning back time and bringing everybody back. What do you think?
Yeah, of course. That's the interesting thing is, to me, having read the source material so far, the bits that I have read, since I haven't read it all, how it's going to happen, because the players in the source material that defeat Thanos are not in this movie.
Interesting. Would that be Captain Marvel?
They haven't even been introduced yet. They haven't even they they've been planted as, at least one character has been planted as a seed.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, and at the end of the not the end of this the Infinity War movie, but at the end of Guardians 2.
Oh, I'm trying to remember now. What was that? Who was that?
It was the big cocoon. So.
Oh, right.
So there's a character called Adam Warlock, and Adam Warlock is the guy that helps defeat Thanos. It was his strategy that helps defeat Thanos. But he hasn't been introduced at all. He comes out of that cocoon. So...
Did we see the cocoon at all in this? I didn't see it.
No. That's why. It's in Guardians. So are they just going to skip Adam Warlock and have them defeat Thanos some other way?
Interesting. I mean, they showed the cocoon. It's like Chekhov's cocoon. If you show the cocoon in one movie, it has to be open at some other point, right? So maybe that's... Well, because we also have at the post-credit scene, we have... eye patch, Samuel L. Jackson's character, Nick Fury. Sorry, Nick Fury. Yeah. As he goes to dust, he's sending a text or a page to Captain Marvel. That's whose symbol was on there. And we have a Captain Marvel movie coming. That movie is actually going to take place. It's going to be set in the 90s, so it'll be prior to all of this action, and the implication being that Captain Marvel and whoever else are among those who are key to solving this, maybe.
Right.
I mean, there are some characters who didn't show up. Hawkman. Hawkeye. I knew I was getting it wrong. Hawkeye. Ant-Man, who's got another movie that's out, I think, this week as we record this. And a couple others that could be brought in, maybe. It's an interesting question. I mean, Tony's still around. Steve is still around. The Hulk. There are people who are the original Avengers. Now let's kind of address the lurking question mark. Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans have both said they've been doing this for 10 years. They're ready to move on. What do you think? What do you think happens to them at the end of the second movie when it comes out next year? What's your guess? They survive or they die?
Okay, so on the one hand, it could just be what actors tend to do, which is they say, "Okay, I'm done," so that they can get more money. And,
like Daniel Craig
at the contract and so contract negotiations. Oh, he's ready to walk out. So that's one. That's one possibility. But okay, having said that, and then maybe they really are ready to call it quits. There has been precedent in the comics, in the source material already. I think even I haven't been keeping up, but I think Tony's been gone for a while.
Interesting. Someone else's Iron Man.
No, there's like some kind of hologram of Tony kind of hanging out.
Okay.
But it's not really Tony. And then there's
different people have become Captain America, right?
And different people have become Captain America as well. Yes. So like Rhodey has become Captain America. Bucky has become Captain America. And even before that, there was in the 80s, there was another guy who was Captain America, and he became American something like, but he was kind of there was two Captain Americas kind of.
Okay.
And so, so it's still possible that, okay, well, Steve Rogers doesn't have to be Captain America. Someone can pick up the mantle, and it could be Rhodey. It could be Bucky.
Interesting. That would be interesting to see either of those two actors pick it up. I mean, the likelihood, I think, is that from just
not Rhodey, but I'm getting them mixed up.
Oh, Falcon.
Falcon, yeah, I forgot his character's name, but Falcon, the guy that plays Falcon.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see how they would handle that and passing on the mantle of that. That would be. I'd be curious.
And that said, Rhodey has become Iron Man.
Oh, right.
In the comics.
that makes sense given that
in the 80s. Yeah, in the 80s, he was Iron Man for a while because
right.
I think Tony was dead.
Of course.
Or he was crippled, or I don't know what.
What's the difference between soap operas and comic books?
I'm marveling at Luis's, like, all that's in Luis's brain. That's very impressive, Luis. Very impressive.
And that's not even the half of it, Lisa, the complexities. So at the end of the movie, so before the credits, as Thanos has said, once he's done what he's got to do, he's going to go and sit by, a Pleasant Valley and bask in the gratitude of the universe. And we see him kind of walking out of this primitive hut and, kind of sitting down and sighing. A couple of things I notice is he's scarred, like his face is scarred and his hand is scarred. He doesn't have the gauntlet. If I recall correctly, or if he has the gauntlet, it's mangled. I think that's what it is. It was hard. It was very quick, so it was hard to see. I've only seen it twice. So, but the gauntlet is mangled, and that's very interesting to me. So that, when he does this, it's a one-time thing, and his superpowers are gone at this point. If that's true, if what I saw was accurate.
I don't know. That's how the comic series ends, is with Thanos looking exactly that way in that area, in that place. That's how the series ends.
Interesting.
So he retires. He retires, and he's become a farmer, and he walks, and he's dressed exactly the way he is dressed in the movie.
That's a very interesting thing that they decided to do it that way. Then that they decided to kind of even where they've split from the comics, they decided to end this first half where the series ends.
The whole entire series ended.
Yeah. I think partly it's because it leaves us hanging. Like even the comic book fans don't know what's coming because they haven't read ahead. So that's a very interesting position to be in. And
it's good because you don't want to know what's coming. Like as a comic book, you've read a version of the story. This is a different version of the story. And it's more fun not knowing how this version is going to turn out.
So have either of you read the Silmarillion from J.R.R. Tolkien?
Yes.
So when I saw this, when I came out of the movie, I said, "Hey, so I saw the Silmarillion movie today." I put this on Facebook. Morgoth was collecting the Silmarils, and the Noldor and Valar had to stop him before he got them all and unleashed hell on Middle Earth. Oh, wait, I saw Avengers. I couldn't help myself because I'm a huge Tolkien nerd. So I immediately said, the gems are the Silmarils. And it's sort of but it's a common story, this idea of they're MacGuffins in one sense, but it's the search for power, to rule, to rule the world, to rule our reality, in some ways, the search for power to overrule God's rule over us, that if I get enough power, God won't have any control over me. That's ultimately when it comes down to the story of Lucifer and becoming Satan and will not serve in heaven. So I thought that was a very interesting, sort of, trying to think of the word, the story kind of resonates. It's an interesting resonance in the story. I'll put it that way. But did you guys have any last thoughts on the movie that you wanted to share?
One of the things that struck me, just as one who looks at story, I'm always learning about the concept of agency. And Luis, this is probably something that you look at with your characters, but who controls the power in the story? And so to me, it was clear in this one, who it was, but will he be stripped of his agency going forward? So will he, and especially with what you just said, Dom, like how will the story move forward and who grasps that control at this point? I just know in writing for children, one of the things that I've always been counseled about is making sure that my child characters aren't controlled by the adults, but rather that they control their world around them and that they are the ones who lead forward in their action and all that. So just as a storyteller, what will happen from here with Thanos.
Okay, but what do you mean by agency? Because I'm really into story, but I don't understand.
You don't understand that comment. So I'll tell you, like, writing for children in my first book, there was a particular mode of action that was going to happen. And I made a mistake, which sometimes adults who try to write for children make, which is that I had all these adult characters in the book and that they were actually the ones who really, it was through their decisions and through, permission that they gave or whatever, that the plot moved forward. And my editor, who was an expert in children's literature, counseled me that for kids, they need to see the primary characters as their peers, the children. They need to see them being largely in control of the action as it moves forward. So the action needs to not be done to them, but rather they drive the action.
Yeah, that's in all stories. I was
right.
I was actually had a conversation with a friend of mine who was doing a short, and near the end of the story, he had something happen because the bad guy did something. And I'm like, no, you have to have the protagonist instigate that, because you can't just have it be by chance or have the bad guy do it, or the solution has to come from the protagonist.
Yep.
Protagonist is...
You wanted him to have the agency.
Yeah. Well, it's not even the protagonist. I should, because depending on the theory the story theory, you could split the protagonist and the main character into two different sources, so that you could have the main character be Watson and the protagonist be Sherlock.
Right.
He moves the story forward, but you see everything from the viewpoint of Watson. So the main character is the viewpoint, and the protagonist is he who moves the story forward. But the solution to the problem may not necessarily come from the protagonist; it can come from the main character. So the main character has to do the solving, or the protagonist. If the main character and the protagonist are the same person, then the solution has to come from them.
In Infinity War, throughout this story, Thanos drives the action.
So
everyone else is reacting.
He's the protagonist of the story. I was just talking about my wife to my wife about it too. I'm like, Thanos is totally the protagonist of the story. And the thing that I admire about this story, because I'm wrestling with this very thing myself, because I'm doing a story and it's got a ton of characters, and I'm like trying to juggle all these characters, and I'm like, how the heck did they do it in Infinity War? Because you've got so many characters, and each character is a block. Each group of characters is a block.
Right.
So, and they kind of represent what? What do they represent? Each block. Because if the main character, the protagonist is Thanos. He's the one moving the story forward. Then you've got all these teams, and they are, and they have their own role to play within the story, and they have a beginning, middle, and an end in their sequences, but they're all completely far apart and broken up into its own little pieces. And it's like, so how would you even write a scene like that? And do you just make a mini movie out of every single one of these things, and make a main character in each one of these things, and make a protagonist in each one of these little mini situations between all? I'm like, dang, man, this is really crazy amount of juggling of elements.
Well, that's one of the things
I admire the most about the movie.
Right. I was going to say, that's one of the great things about this movie is what you could have ended up with was, okay, we have 30 different characters that have to show up at different points. So let's just make sure everybody gets a couple minutes on the screen and says something fun, and then they just kind of throw them in there. But mostly it's, Tony and it's Steve Rogers, that could have been, how they did it, but they didn't. Everybody, all of the major characters from all those previous films, they all had a role to play that was vital, that was important, that was key to where they eventually ended up. And they juggled it all. No one felt like they got short shrift. No one felt like they were just a placeholder. Maybe you could say Black Widow, but then again, that's been the complaint about Black Widow from the beginning, I think, is that she's sort of there and has not gotten enough attention. So that may be just a continuation of that. but pretty much everybody gets, like, Scarlet Witch has got a storyline with Vision. Tony's got a storyline with Doctor Strange, and then in comes Peter Parker. The Guardians, they are with Thor, and then they're with Tony. I mean, everyone has a key role in all of this, and it's balanced. I mean, that's one of the things that makes this such a good movie is it's balanced. And like we were saying, Thanos is the through line. Everybody is reacting to everything that Thanos does. No one, he is proactive throughout it. Everyone has to react to his actions and his moves, which is why they lose. I mean, this is classic von Clausewitz, the art, and the Art of War, and Sun Tzu. I mean, if you're always on the defensive, if you're always reacting to someone else's actions, you're going to lose. And that's what happens here is they end up losing because they're always reacting. The interesting question is Doctor Strange, in that moment when I think he engineers the event, he plants the seed of Thanos' downfall, is when he takes that agency. I think he takes agency in that moment when he hands over the stone. And I think he sees the way through, which is a way of self-sacrifice, or at least temporary self-sacrifice. And that's his way through. I thought actually that's a really good point, is about the watch who has agency in the movie.
Also, having left the theater, the very first reaction that I had with all my friends when we talked about it, because I'm surrounded by nerds at work, and I have there's one of my coworkers, kind of like my boss, who's in the other office. He the first thing that we said was that was the first comic book movie that felt like a comic book.
Interesting.
That was the 100% felt like this is how comic books end all the time, like all the stinking time. Like you're just like, what? The end. And you're like, oh, now I got to read the next one.
You got to wait a month for the next issue.
This is how but it felt dead on like an actual comic. Like this is the first time it really just felt like they nailed that feel that you get when you're reading one of these comics and you're like, no, I gotta wait till a month for the next issue. So
yes. And sometimes like certain TV series as well. Like, I'm trying to think of the TV series Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch, where, Sherlock dies at the end of as one of the seasons, which, it's 3 episodes, but you know what I mean? And you're like, oh, like, he can't be dead. Like, we have to wait like 2 years to see the next season of this. How does he get out of this? We know he gets it's that cliffhanger feeling that most movies, even multi-part movies, like say Star Wars, they don't leave you like that. I mean, maybe you could say Empire kind of leaves you like that with Han being frozen in carbonite, but that it's not really like everyone's lost. Like the evil has won in that. There's still hope at the end. This one leaves you with that. Okay, so everyone, your guy's lost. See you next month.
Yeah. Well, but see, this is how it feels like. That's why I've been into comics for so long, because they just constantly do that. They're just throwing curveballs at you all the time, and
right.
There's no such. They're trying to always. There's no status quo. They're just like they're always breaking the characters, and they're always changing things up, and that's why characters keep dying and getting replaced, and then they sort of go back slightly to the status quo for a little while, and then they break everything again.
Right.
So this really did feel like it's the first time that comic book movie really did feel to me like a comic. Like I was like, wow, totally like a comic. That's awesome.
I think this is a good place to wrap it up for us. Excuse the cough. And let the listeners kind of react and send us your feedback. We'd love to hear what do you think? Like, how did you feel when your favorite character died? Did you feel like this is the most comic book of all the movies? And tell us about what your thoughts on Thanos' agency, or his whether was it a plot hole? What did you think of this movie? So you can let us know by either going to sqpn.com, find the show page there. You just click on the link, leave a comment. You can go to the SQPN Facebook page. Just go to Facebook and search for SQPN. Leave us a comment there. You can send us an email to secrets@sqpn.com. But leave us some feedback. You can even send us some voice feedback. We'll play it on a future episode of Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. In the meantime, you can find links to all of our personal social media and our websites on our show notes on sqpn.com. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast feed to ensure you receive all future installments of the Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. And so until next time, Luis Escobar, thank you for sharing in the Secrets of Avengers.
Oh, well, thanks for the invite. And this was fun.
Great. And Lisa Hendey, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom. Great to be with you.
Once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and thank you for listening.